Welcome to the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast. I am Jeremy Nygaard, joined by Jordan Lehman. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Doing well. A lot of middle border action last night that we kind of got to observe. Last night being Tuesday the 12th. Doing well. Yeah, it's getting into the thick of the season, basketball-wise, for both boys and girls, and there's some cream starting to rise to the top when it comes to the local conferences. There's also some local conferences that are just giving us more questions than answers. But it's definitely a good time to be a basketball fan.
Yeah, for sure. So later in this episode, we'll play the interview that we did on Tuesday, so yesterday, with Coach Randy Jordan of St. Croix Central. And I think that will be something that listeners will enjoy. Coach Jordan has quite the resume, quite the coaching resume. And we touch on a lot of the things that he's done, a lot of the success that he's had. So that'll come up here in the second half of the show. But for now, we'll just recap what's going on in our area. So we like to look at rankings. Obviously, they're the coaches' polls. So coaches typically know pretty well what's going on. And so there's a number of teams in our area that are ranked. So we'll just start by running through the Western Wisconsin teams that are ranked in Division I. Number 9, Chippewa Falls. So they actually got beat last night by Division II, number 4, Onalaska. Chippewa Falls is in the Big Rivers. Onalaska is down south, but someone that Division II teams will have to go through on the western side of the state. Number 8, River Falls, who did drop a game earlier this week to Hudson, but I think River Falls and Onalaska probably look at each other kind of on a crash course to see each other in the what would I believe be the sectional semis.
Yeah.
And so
be the same round
that'll be, there's obviously a number of other teams that are going to be vying for that spot, but those two would be two to keep your eye on that part of the bracket in Division II. Moving down to Division III, Wisconsin Dells would be in the southern part of our section. They're ranked number 5. St. Croix Central, just down the Highway 12 here from Baldwin, comes in at number 6. They also got a win last night, convincing win over Somerset. And then number 9, Altoona, also in the southern part of our region. So anything to say quickly about those D3 teams?
Division III, it's an interesting outlook, I think, when it comes to just the it'll be probably sectional playoffs if the teams that, like teams like St. Croix Central, Northwestern, Altoona, Wisconsin Dells, if they take care of business. It'll be interesting to see what team comes out of their respective conference play strongest, because Altoona playing in the Clover Belt, St. Croix Central playing in the middle border, and then Wisconsin Dells, I'm not sure what conference they're in, but each conference would probably argue that they're the stronger, more competitive conference. But the teams that you play and the tempo you have to play make a big difference. And St. Croix Central is a team that we've seen so far when they play at more of a high level, high pace, high possession game, they're very dangerous. But when they play a team that maybe doesn't subscribe to that philosophy, like Baldwin Woodville, when things are slowed down intentionally, it kind of can take that away. So it'll just be interesting, because I'm not sure if each conference has quote unquote a style of play, but I think the middle border is definitely trending towards, like I said, high possession, a lot of speed, a lot of transition. So it'll just be interesting to see how the Altoonas, the Wisconsin Dells of the world, when they do collide with whoever comes out of the middle border in D3, what that matchup will look like.
And Altoona went, I believe, to the regional finals, or won the regional finals last year. The big news, I would say, with Altoona was the returning conference player of the year, Keyshawn Harris, tore his ACL this summer. So he's, the the best player in that conference, and he's just not playing. So Altoona still 9-3, but at the same time down, a stud. They beat Somerset, who is a very good team. Fall Creek gave them issues early, but Altoona then turned around and beat Prescott. And they struggled. I wouldn't say struggled recently. They have losses to Mosinee and Stanley Boyd, but I think they would be playing a higher possession type of game if Keyshawn was available, and
Yeah.
that just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for a winter season. But they're still a tough team, and they're gonna be very good. They are very good, but I would say that Wisconsin Dells would be the favored team to come out of that group. They're in the South Central Conference, and they're 4-2, or 4-0 overall in the conference, and 8-0 overall. So I don't know if you went to that game it would have been 3 seasons ago, when Prescott played the Dells in Menominee in the sectional final, and that was really fun, and it was a high scoring game. Looking at the results from this year, they scored 69-1, 66. Otherwise, mid 60s or lower, 50, 52, 35. They won last night, so they don't seem to be an overly fast team. They were a big team previously, and I don't know, obviously if they have a lot of height. It looks like they go 6'2", 6'4", 6'2", 6'3", 6'2". So they have a deep bench. I would just based on this roster. So I would say they've got to be the favorites to come out of the South, but that's a very contrasting style to the St. Croix Central, who dropped 90 again last night.
Yeah. Central, Coach Jordan does a real nice job later in this episode of talking through kind of some of their philosophies. But yeah, we've spoken many times about they're able to utilize their athletes extremely well in a higher pace system. They're able to get up and down the floor faster than their opponents. Carson Hensman's been a huge part of their success with just kind of owning the boards offensively and defensively. So yeah, and looking at the Big Rivers, we were actually just talking about the Big Rivers last night a little bit on our call of the BW girls game, just the disparity between enrollments, because it's easy for me to forget, just because I haven't really followed the Big Rivers closely, nor have I ever competed in it. It's easy for me to forget that like River Falls and Hudson aren't the same size. Like you just kind of conflate them in your mind. Right. Same thing with Eau Claire Norths and the Eau Claire Memorials. Like River Falls has given up a lot of kids in those kind of games. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be in the conference or anything like that, or that it's, too much of a competitive advantage. But River Falls dropped into Hudson. And Hudson right now is in sole possession of first place just based on conference wins in the Big Rivers. It does make you think, like, it's just, I wonder how much that goes through the minds of players or coaches, or if it does at all. But, being in the middle border, my whole, sports competitive career, and then also as a fan, it's definitely significant within Richmond, but everybody else is just usually within like 50 to so kids. So it doesn't really ever cross your mind.
Yeah, I think if you looked at the middle border enrollments, you would see that there's a wider gap than you thought.
Right.
And I think Big Rivers too. And the other thing with the Big Rivers is this season's going to end, and Chippewa Falls has only played 4 conference games. Hudson's played 7. There's a decent chance, because they're going to play with 7 teams. They'll play 12 games. So Hudson's half done. But there's a decent chance that conference champ might not win double-digit games. It might be 9-3 or 8-4. Because right now you have Hudson at 5-2, Chippewa Falls at 3-1, River Falls at 3-2, North at 3-3, Menominee at 3-4, Eau Claire, North at 3-3, Memorial at 2-3, Menominee at 3-4, and then Rice Lake 0-4. So they're all going to get those top 6 teams will probably all have somewhere between 5 and 9 wins.
Mhm.
And so that what's going to be weird is when you go into a seeding meeting, because I think the Big Rivers is a strong conference, and I guess comparatively, I don't really know what other conferences will be represented in those rooms. But to say, we were this and this, and it's not going to look great, even though, like you said, when we were talking about this previously, they're just going to beat up on each other. And so much in seeding meetings comes down to records. And this year, if they do electronic seeding, maybe that's not necessarily the case. But these teams are probably going to be underseeded, and all have a chance to win games in the playoffs, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, I draw a close comparison to the Big Ten when I look at the Big Rivers right now, because there's so much talent. There's so much talent. Like the Reuter kid from Chippewa is going to be a scholarship kid. Hudson's guard Healy is going to be a scholarship kid. Obviously, River Falls has 3 scholarship kids. And there's no, I mean, there's a younger Bosser at Memorial whose older brother is a scholarship basketball player. So it's like, and he's filling it up as a sophomore right now for Memorial. So it's like, Wisconsin gets drilled last night against Michigan, and maybe Michigan is the far superior team in the conference and they run the table, but I would suspect they won't, just because there's so many good teams in the Big Ten, and I think the Big Rivers can end up that way as well. But yeah, it's exciting. It's one of those things where, if you're Coach Johnson or Campbell rather, at River Falls, and maybe you drop, obviously they dropped to Hudson, but they drop maybe a couple more, still hopefully, win the conference. But if they do drop in seeding, it's not necessary. I mean, this season it's a little bit odd because the host factor, hosting a game versus not hosting a game, might not be nearly as significant as it would be, in a packed, we saw Prescott's gym in the regional final last year, and it's a big deal when you can host one of those. But if it's not a true home court advantage, then it might not be really a big deal, and you might end up playing a little bit teams that maybe don't think of you as highly as they should,
Right. Moving through the rest of the rankings here, just real quick. Division 4, locally, Cameron's ranked number 3, and Fall Creek, who I mentioned previously, is ranked number 8. And then in D5, Clear Lake, we talked to Coach Sargent last week or 2 weeks ago. They're ranked number 6, and they're really only the only team in our area that shows up in those rankings. So last night we had a discussion after the game a little bit about how the playoffs would look, and talking to someone that has a little bit more knowledge of these things than we do. The one thing that came up in that conversation that stood out to me, and I'm not trying to break any news here or because it's not at that point yet, but there's a lot of discussions that are still happening about how the end of the season is going to look. And we had mentioned that before on the WSN podcast. There was a point in time where they said, we don't know if we're going to have enough people or enough schools willing to host sectional semi games, that it might be a higher seed. And then it kind of took on its own life, where are we going to reseed teams in the section and then have a neutral court for the sectional final? Like, there's a lot of unknowns. The solution, one of the potential solutions, would be handling the state championship like volleyball did. Now in volleyball, they played a semifinal game in the morning, the 2 semifinal games, and then there was a break in time, and then they played the state championship game later. And there was, I think, 4 schools around the state of Wisconsin that then hosted the 4 different titles. And that's on the table for basketball. A semifinal doubleheader earlier in the day, followed by a state championship game later in the day. How crazy would that be?
I just because I'm naturally brought back to days of playing Great Northwest tournaments where you play your seeding games, or not your seeding games, but just your group play, and then you play in the championship game or whatever. But obviously back then you're talking about games that are maybe almost half as long as these varsity games will be. I mean, you're loading up with nachos and Mountain Dew, and um, but yeah, I mean, if that's a reality, a lot of these kids. What's interesting is a lot of these kids at these very good on these very good teams are used to playing multiple games of high competitive, high level basketball in a day with AAU. Um, but there's so many things that go into, you can speak to this with basketball and me playing in, some higher level playoff games and a couple other sports, like the nerves and the emotional energy spent in like just a state game or a semifinal or a quarterfinal. Like, I'm sure that when you run onto a gym floor like Somerset's was your senior year, when there's thousands of people in there and it's going nuts, and what the stakes are, that it's a little bit different than playing Red Wing Blue in Great Northwest on a seventh grade Saturday.
Right. Well, and I think too, like, there are going to be 4 fan bases, so you want to have fans there. You probably have to limit the amount of tickets for each school. But if you have a gym that can hold 2,000 people and you put them in groups of the 4 groups and spread them out, you could probably fit 1,000 people in the gym.
Right.
If you spread them out. But that to me, that idea of, for me, from a coaching perspective, like, you're going to prepare to win that semifinal game. You don't have then time to turn around and prepare for one of 2. Like, how do you spend less time preparing for the semifinal in hopes that you can then prepare for the 2 other teams? Like, there's just so much, or is it going to just be, we want to get there and then we're going to just roll out the ball and see who's better in a championship game? I I don't know how that would work. And I think the other thing that has to be considered is broadcasting. Like, the D1 state championship game doesn't happen the same time as D5. Could it happen over a full weekend where Friday there's something going on, and then Saturday? Like, how do you stagger the start times
Yeah.
to do that? I mean, this isn't TBS, TNT, True TV, and CBS. This is Fox Sports or whatever, however we broadcast. So
Right. They just don't have the stat, probably the numbers to allocate to, the Wisconsin State basketball championships, if said championships are at 5 different locations or more different locations. Um, one thing to consider, I think, if we get Coach Johnson on again, which I hope we will, and I think we could, he's been in a situation where you turn around and you play a new team, not on the same day, but within a day, right? Within hours, right? And he's a guy, he's a film hound. He's talked to us about how it's just, he's got assistant coaches breaking down inbounds tendencies. He's got assistant coaches breaking down, post play, like talking about when he played East Troy and breaking down their post players tendencies. Like, when you only have, 24 hours, literally 24 hours to do that or less. It'd be interesting to see what his strategy's been in the past. And even, I mean, the lifestyle of, as you know, of a high school varsity basketball coach is just kind of constantly trying to find time and trying to rack your brain to prepare for the next game, whether it's the next day or 2 days from then. Especially if you're into analytics like you are and a lot of high level coaches are, and just tendencies. So yeah, I think he could give some insight. But to what I was saying earlier with the 1 day thing, just the nostalgia factor, like in a year that, like, we've had, talking about calendar year since the pandemic began, it would seem kind of fitting to have a state championship game in taking place at just a high school where it's these kids are brought back to that feeling where there's, cafeteria chairs up and there's maybe a concession stand with food, and it's Racine St. Catherine's on one, on one table and St. Croix Central on the other. And they're just looking at each other before the game like, okay, we're about to do this thing. But no, it's real interesting. And yeah, I mean, broadcasting getting things on television is the interesting thing. I don't know if people are just going to say, you know what, it's going to be YouTube and we're going to have certain broadcasting teams from around the state take those over. And we're just going to do YouTube, and maybe send FSN to the D1 bracket or whatever. But yeah, definitely be interesting.
The interesting thing that is definitely a part of it is that the WIA has an exclusive deal with NFHS, which is a streaming service. Now, how things are available? Do you have to pay for things? Like it's not YouTube where you just dial it in. YouTube's pretty sweet when you're watching live sports because when the game's over, it automatically switches you to another game. And so we're watching a game the other night, and then it finishes, and then all of a sudden, boom, Hudson River Falls is on, and there's 17 seconds left, and it's a close game, and we're like, hey, we'll watch the end of this one. And I think even last night and, the game that we did against New Richmond boys for Baldwin Woodville, that's when you get all the viewers because, our girls game last night goes into overtime, and all of a sudden there's 30 more people watching. And it's, you just bounce around. And if you could stagger start times in any event, then it would be pretty neat that you could, watch the end of a game, then flip over and watch the second half, another game will flip over. And the logistic part of it though is just, it's going to be crazy because you mentioned like you have 24 hours in the state tournament to prepare for the next team. You go back to the hotel and then probably find a conference room and meet with your players, or you go into a big lobby. That would be a little bit different than you have 3 hours to prepare and you're not leaving the school, and who knows if you have internet access. It's just it would be one of those things that it's unprecedented, but it would be fun.
And do these host sites have to have 2 varsity sized capable gyms? Like what's like, if let's say that you're coaching a game at 9 a.m.
Yep.
And it's a state semifinal, and you're the other coach, and you got to coach at 11:30 a.m. for a championship game.
That's 7.
It's like, there's 2 more hours there. So if you're not sharing gyms, you can do 2, but
Yeah, it would be 4 teams, and you would have probably 9 and 11:30 or noon and 10 and noon, and then you would have that time off, and you'd come back for a championship game at night. And do you have to give enough time in between games to disinfect the gym? Do you have to, there's going to be all these things, these protocols that I've pushed for us, Baldwin Woodville, to host as much as we can. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, you get people in, you get people out. But we have a facility that, we have the extra locker rooms. We have another building that's relatively close if people want to get into a gym or whatever. Plus, that type of thing in your own backyard is entertaining, and I'm all for that.
And could you combine with like for us, we're 4 miles away from St. Croix Central. Like, could you combine with them and say, hey, we're going to host one semi there, one semi here
At the same time?
There, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like, there's towns that have hotels, motels, whatever, that probably are not filled to capacity. And I don't know how school districts feel about that, but the WIA pays to put people up in Madison. It would be a lot cheaper to put people up in Cobblestone down the road. If the WIA paid for that, you could play your games on a Friday night, bus them to the hotel, bus them back. Like that might be a line that they don't want to necessarily cross or approach, or but you got to think that that's a possibility. I mean, there's people out doing these sort of things.
Right.
You just got to take all the precautions that you can. And, do you rapid test people when they show up? There's all these questions that are not answered. And really, for the decision makers, how do you settle on answers? Because you could talk in circles for literally months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that'll all. I look forward to how this is all resolved, because they're going to have to come up for it, not just for the boys but for the girls as well, and that's a week sooner. So, quick rundown of the Middle Border Conference. We talked about the big rivers. St. Croix Central won last night against Somerset, which improves their conference record to 6-0. New Richmond second place at 5-1. CJ Campbell at 49 in a win over Ellsworth. So they put themselves in second place with their lone loss being to Central, which was a blowout. But Coach Jordan will speak about that a little bit later. Third place, Prescott at 4-2. They beat Amory last night. Somerset drops to 4-3 and 11-4 overall. So they played 15 games already.
Right.
Battle tested, have performed really well outside of the conference. 7-1 outside of the Middle Border. So they're in fourth. All of those teams over 500. And then the bottom half currently, Ellsworth at 2-4. Like we mentioned, they lost to Richmond. Baldwin Woodville at 2-4. They went to Osceola and won Monday night. Amory at 1-5. First conference win in, I believe, 33 games. They beat Osceola last week in a shootout, 33-29. And then Osceola pulling up the rear currently at 0-5. So is that not quite halfway done with the conference schedule? Is this order the way that you see it ending?
I think Somerset. I think Prescott and Somerset are both in very similar situations where they're very good. At their best, they're very good. But I'm not sure if they know exactly who they are yet. I think New Richmond, having CJ, I think it's easier to say now that the anticipation, the predictions for him being an elite scorer were correct. I mean, you quite simply can't score 49 points in a game, in a competitive conference game, unless you are, a next level scorer. So New Richmond, I mean, we've seen it before in this conference where one player with some other nice pieces can truly take a team to, being a great team. So I think they kind of know what steers their ship. But with Central, I think they, Coach Jordan talks about it later in the episode about maybe when this group found its identity and when things started to click. I think they truly know who they are and what their identity is, and that's something that you can't undervalue. Another team that I think is starting to find theirs is BW. I think they're Coach Benoit in his first tenure as head coach, he was a defensive minded team that would have some teams that were very offensively gifted and some teams that were not. And a lot of times that it seemed like the offensive success was kind of dictated by the players want to. I know you've spoken about in the past that when you were a player for Coach Benoit, that you had a group that really liked to run, really liked to push. But the one thing that, like I said, that they do take very seriously and kind of harp on is their defense. And Coach Jordan talks about them later in the episode how they're doing a nice job. So I think Baldwin Woodville has a great chance to finish, right around that middle area. Maybe win a handful more games. I think they'll repeat in wins over Osceola and Amory. Definitely have a great chance against Ellsworth. Beating Prescott's, New Richmond's, and the Centrals. I think all things got to be clicking. I think one player that has started to step up a little bit in the scoring role for Baldwin Woodville is Keegan Offsey, and he's one of the premier athletes I think in the conference. But scoring wise, it was a big question mark. I know for me and you coaching him in the past, like when is we always knew he could shoot, we knew he could score, but when is that going to kind of come to fruition? It's he hit 5 threes against Osceola, and then they've always got the offensive skill of Dylan Caro. They got a solid point guard in Cam, so they're a team that kind of like Ellsworth. They've got some legit pieces, but will they be able to lean on those pieces in big time games? We'll have to see. And then Osceola and Amory, they're two teams that are obviously in a rebuilding situation. Amory getting that win it's good for Coach Lumen, good for the kids. And Osceola, they're just trying to get their legs under them. A lot of those kids playing their first varsity minutes of basketball ever after playing a full football season, playing their first varsity football ever. So a lot of news for that group of juniors and some of those sophomores. But I think our predictions have been kind of right on with Central. I think they're the class of the conference, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time to welcome in Coach Jordan. So we will get to that interview now. All right, welcome back to the Western Wisconsin Sports Podcast. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined by co-host Jordan Lehman, and we have a special guest, Coach Randy Jordan of the St. Croix Central Panthers, joining us today. Coach, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Fantastic. We'll let Jordan ask some questions here now.
Yeah, Coach, thanks for being here. Start off with just the state of your team. Coming up on, I'm not exactly sure how many games you guys have played, but it's been close to 10. How are the guys, and how are you as a coach, and how's everything going?
Well, everything. I mean, we're getting through things. On this President year, we've had a kid that's been on quarantine twice. I mean, one of our starters, Colin Hackbarth, he started the year missing the first week of practice, and then now he hasn't played a game since December, right before Christmas. So he's been out our last 2 games, and he's the only one that we've had to quarantine. But we do have another kid, Connor Nelson, who comes off the bench for us as a backup post player, and he's got some type of stomach flu that he's been fighting since right before Christmas too, and he will not be playing tonight. So as of right now, we stand 7-1, and we have Somerset coming to visit tonight, which is a big middle border game for us.
Right. Yeah, the COVID, we've talked to a couple coaches now that, COVID's affected, I think, every school in similar ways and also unique ways. Coming into the season, for you personally, did you expect us to get this far and to get this far pretty much unscathed? I mean, obviously, like you said, you've had a couple players, but it seems like things are headed in the right direction.
I think so. I think, when we started the year, I really didn't have a whim. I just didn't know whether we were how much season we were going to get. We were just going to have to value each day that we had a chance to come to practice and play games and stuff. And we've been pretty pleased for so far. Our kids have bought into, that, as far as we don't know when the season will ever end. We just got to keep playing the best we can and try and do that each and every day.
Yeah, and you guys were a part of the last game played last year in the playoffs. Obviously, that was a loss for you guys against Prescott, but what was it like playing in that game and getting your kids ready for that game when all of a sudden there were restrictions and, only so many people could come to the game, things like that? What was that like?
It was a little different. The biggest thing was it affected probably the fans more than it affected us. I mean, we were getting ready to play Prescott, knowing that they beat us, twice before, and they're definitely the top team in the area, and we just wanted to do it, or wanted to try and get a win out of the thing. But as far as preparing for it, it didn't bother us any differently. I guess after we lost and they beat us, I really felt bad when they called the season off, because I thought Prescott had a good chance of going a long way in the state, and I felt bad for them.
Right. Since that point, you guys had the privilege of returning quite a few contributors. What was the off season like from your perspective? Just kind of whether it was communication with your kids during the quarantine, whether it was seeing them working out. What were you impressed by with your kids over the quarantine, even with the restrictions that they had?
You know, well, we give them workouts that they could possibly do on their own at home, and we didn't get into any contact days until July. We couldn't have any contact days. Never did go to a tournament on a weekend or anything. We just basically held open gyms one night a week and tried to do the things that we wanted to do there as far as what we were teaching in our contact days, and just basically doing some repetition. And the kids, as far as workouts, we basically give them a workout, and I was very impressed with come July, with the improvement I thought I seen in them and what they did over the summer to get better.
Right, and you've got quite a few multi-sport athletes, and very successful multi-sport athletes. Whether it's Seiler or Carson Hinsman being a legitimate national prospect in football. How have you seen the kids balance, the multi-sport stuff, coming into basketball from football being such a physical sport, and St. Croix Central playing such a physical brand of football? Have the kids been mature with that and been, kind of done whatever you wanted right away, or has it kind of taken some time over the last couple of years for them to recover from, such a physical fall?
No, I mean, as a head coach, I really emphasize them trying to be multi-sport athletes. I think high school is a time where they need to enjoy things and go out and get as many experiences as they can. And being the multi-sport players that we have, I think it's a benefit for them to get away from the game of basketball for a while and compete in other sports. And I think they've handled it real well. We've got definitely every one of our or all four of our starters, and probably 5 out of the top 7 are definitely our football players and pretty good football players. So, I mean, it's good to see them be able to enjoy that and compete and come into the basketball season. In the summertime, they definitely have put in time, I think, for both sports. The biggest thing we try to emphasize in the summer is the strength and conditioning that carries over to all sports.
Right. Yeah, that's such a huge factor. And I know from experience, I've had friends coach at St. Croix Central, and I've gotten to know some coaches there. I've always been really impressed with how SCC does things on an athletic development standpoint. When it comes to their weight room and just other athletic development things. What else stuck out to you coming into a new district in St. Croix Central? What were some things that impressed you right away?
The basic thing was the upbeat of the kids and the willingness to listen and learn. I mean, I really felt that they were hungry to be able to they appreciate on the court, and they appreciate what the coaches do for them. In every sport that they play, they seem to be great kids and just want to compete and learn.
Right. Looking at this year more specifically, you guys, like you said, you're sitting at 7-1 so far without a loss in conference. I've been at me and Coach Knight had the privilege of watching your team quite a bit, and it looks like you guys have a rare combination of a size, length, and a lot of players with the ability to score. Did you see that coming into this year?
I mean, we did. We really felt that we had a lot of guys that, even last year, I thought we had got, most of the time our scoring was pretty balanced. I think we had 3 or 4 guys that averaged in double figures, and we knew coming back that we were hoping that each one of them would improve in that area, and that's been our key all year. I think is that we are definitely a balanced team, and any one of probably 5 guys could score 20 points on a given night, and it's just. It's good to be able to have that, and very fortunate I, as a coach, to be able to coach kids like that.
Right. One player in particular, Gabe Seiler. Me and Knight have been watching him as a starter since he was a sophomore. And I remember just kind of passing by when me and Knight were watching warm-ups 3 years ago. I said that kid could be the player of the year when he's a senior, and it's been interesting to watch him kind of in his role this year, as he's kind of, from my perspective, really taken on a distributing role, rebounding, not just scoring. Have you been impressed with Gabe so far?
Well, I've been very impressed with Gabe. Just tonight I had a talk with him. He was feeling bad that he wanted to try and do more for our team, and that's the type of kid he is. But I really feel that he's improved so much over last year, and taking care of the basketball and making sure distributing, getting everybody else involved, that it's definitely made us a whole new basketball team. I mean, we're much better, I think, than we were a year ago. And I can't say enough about Gabe's effort, because he is accepting that role as far as getting everybody else in points. We told him, start the beginning of the year, for us to be the best we can be, we'd like to see him probably be our fourth or fifth leading scorer, because we need to get everybody else involved to be the best we could be. And he's accepted that and has done a great job for us. And last year he led us in rebounding and assists. And he's right there again this year. His point totals might be a little down, but I definitely think he's a great candidate for Player of the Year.
Was there a time last year, obviously you coming in first year in a new district, was there a time that really stuck out to you as a time where your team kind of started to gel? I mean, we played early. It was a very, very close competitive game. Then we came to your place a little bit later, and I feel like it was another competitive game. And then when we came back in March, it was a different group that in my opinion that we saw played a faster tempo, shot the ball better. A lot of the things that we're seeing from your group this year. Was there a time where you kind of went home after practice and you're like, yep, now we're starting to get it together?
It was early in February. I mean, I really felt that early in February when we started to put things together and click. When you're, as a new coach, when you come in, it takes a while for kids to learn exactly what we're trying to do as far as expecting on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively. But and us as coaches trying to learn as much as we can about the players and trying to put them in the best situation to be successful. And I really felt early in February there, I just feel that our kids started to gel more together and play their best basketball.
Yeah, I mean, from personal experience, I remember sitting on the bench during that playoff game, and just being so impressed with not only how your team played offense, but how your team played defense. It seemed like they just so much intensity, so much communication, just a fundamental understanding of how they were all supposed to move as the ball moved. And that, I feel like that's come into this year as well. I remember watching one of the early games against New Richmond this season, the game where, things went pretty well for you guys. I was so impressed with the pressure you put on the ball in the backcourt, and the turnovers that your kids were able to make. Did you see the kind of defensive stellar season coming?
I felt our kids had the capability of being a good defensive team. I thought they were buying into it, like I said, at the end of last year. But this year, they are so much quicker and stronger. I think the Carson Hintzman is he just doesn't have any baby fat on him anymore. He's just he's just a great athlete, and he definitely helps control the paint for us, which allows us to get out and put more pressure on the perimeter people. And I thought the aspect of us being able to force baseline and give kids the power to pressure. And the biggest thing is that we've really improved on is the help side. I mean, we always have guys that seem like they're in the right spot, ready to come and help. And as we're pressuring, and it's been a lot of fun coaching these kids, to see that improvement in them. And, like I said, we had a little down pack here after River Falls beat us there. I thought our defense kind of took a little bit of a dip there, because we basically let them do what they wanted to. And maybe it was after the New Richmond game where I thought our defense was very strong, that, they started maybe feeling too good about themselves. And that's something we've tried to key on here in the last week or so of practice, is being able to get back to the fundamentals and playing defense like we did to start the year.
If you would have been told before the New Richmond game that you were going to put 100 on them and beat them by over 40, what would you have thought?
Well, I would have never guessed. You got to give them credit. They were lacking 3 players.
Right.
The Covey kid is a huge player for them, I think, as far as whether he's on the court or not on the court. And the other 2 guys were out of their top 6 or 7 guys. And they're definitely going to be a different team when we face them next time.
Well, they're going to be different because they're going to be very angry, probably.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
So yeah, we were in the booth up watching, I think, our boys, and we had that game up, and Jordan just kept giving me the update, and it's like it just kept going and going, and it was mean, whenever a team scores 100, that's cool.
Well, the first half was definitely in our favor. I mean, you would have told me we had 62 points at halftime. I said you were crazy. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So I was doing a little research today on your history, because obviously we knew that you had some experience coaching, and then I realized you've coached for quite a while, but you've coached and had a lot of success at a lot of different levels. So I want to say this article mentioned 7 high school state tournament appearances and 5 small college national tournaments.
Yep.
Including St. Cloud Tech, which was the Nate Walters team. And I mean, I remember him from just being a fan of basketball. How do you think that experience that you have is going to help as we get into March? I mean, you've done this before. Your kids have done this before. And I think, as I left the coaching ranks last year, I was asked, like, who's the best team in the middle border? And my response was, if Carson Hinsman plays basketball, I don't see any team in this area beating St. Croix Central. I thought that there would be more competitive games early in the season, but like the way things look now, teams have to think that you're the favorite to come out of the North. And is your experience, is the players' experience playing in big football games, is that going to help?
Oh, I think it'll help. I think we can, as a coach, I know what it takes as far as trying to keep the players focused on the next event instead of looking back in the past, because that's one thing that if you're gonna be successful at playoff time, you have to be able to focus and concentrate on one game at a time and be able to get the players ready to go.
What are your best memories from your coaching career? I mean, I think I read 114 wins at Stillwater. Some college stuff. What are some memories that really stick out? Some highlights from your coaching career?
Oh, I mean, basically just the relationship you build with kids, trying to get those things, accomplished. You all have one common goal, and that's to win a state title when you have a chance. And it's just being able to make those relationships with the kids. You're going to remember some teams, as far as, how far you went in the postseason and stuff and how far you got. But it comes down to being able to build those relationships with the players.
I got to ask you this one, because I'm looking at a picture right now from 2009. You're in orange, so state tournament.
Yep.
And the towel is present.
Yep.
You still have the towel. Is there a backstory to the towel? Are you a big Tark fan?
No, I actually my Pierre Ducharme, who was my college coach at Mayville State, he did this back, and he basically stressed onto it about the towel is just nothing more than a unity towel, bringing kids together, before and after games and trying to create that unity among the team. And I just tried to carry that over. That's something I just took from him, and I've used it for 40 years.
So every game.
Yep, I've always had a towel. Yep.
That's fantastic. Jordan, do you have any other questions?
Just looking ahead, with the middle border being such a competitive conference, year in and year out, with coaches like Coach Johnson at Prescott, the Somerset team this year being as talented as they are, Baldwin Woodville coming into form, I think, lately with some of their experience. What are some things that stick out to you looking ahead? Obviously, you want to take it one game at a time, but looking ahead, what's kind of on your radar as a coach in the middle border?
The first one is tonight's game. We host Somerset tonight, which I think is a big, if we could get a win there, would definitely put us a couple of games ahead of between us and the guys behind us. And that's the biggest thing is I think the middle border is so competitive each and every night that if you don't show up to play, you could definitely lose. I mean, we had that the other night. Baldwin, I thought, did a nice job as far as coming in. They were one of the better defensive teams I think we faced all year, and they just seemed to do things right, and we were very lucky to come away with a win there. So I think we beat some teams badly early, but I think our press and picking up the tempo of the speed does that. If teams are going to try and run with us, then it's going to be in our favor. But as team learned how to play against us and be able to play good defense, it's gonna be a battle every night.
Is Hackbarth going to be back for the game then?
He's playing tonight.
Okay, he's a player that stuck out to me quite a bit last year in terms of how much he improved.
Yeah.
He was one of the major contributors to sinking our ship last year in that playoff game, because it was just, calling Hackbarth for three over and over again. In early box scores this season, it's been super fun just because I've actually had the chance to talk to Colin, and he's a good kid. It's been fun to see him kind of light the scoreboard up a little bit.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he had one game this year where he had 33, and he's definitely, I think he's definitely, even though his stats aren't showing it right now, I think he's probably our best outside shooter. But Jackson Pettit, I think, would say other things about that. But it's nice to be able to have a guy on each wing being able to be able to catch and shoot like the way they do. And Collins are also our backup point guard. Whenever Gabe has to come out, we don't seem to slow down at all, because I think he does a nice job of filling in those things. And we've definitely, the way we've played the last couple games, have missed him.
When you came in on day one, was Jackson Pettit, like, to me, he was the kid last year that really made a difference, because we knew Gabe Seiler, we knew about Kelson, we knew about Carson, and Colin, I mean, we were aware of, we knew he was going to be younger and make shots, and Lopez could guard. Pettit was the one that, I think you had played one game, he had a bunch of offensive rebounds. Then you came to our place, and he hits a three at the buzzer in the first half and makes a bunch of baskets. And he was a guy that, to me, was really improved a lot from 2 years ago to last year. Did he improve a lot from the day that you came in to that point, or was he someone that when you walked in the gym, you're like, okay, he can play?
We felt he definitely was a player that had good athleticism and seemed to have a knack for scoring. I mean, he wasn't pretty all the times, but he was somebody that knew where to be at the right time and could finish around the basket. Now, I think that his big improvement overall now is the work that he's put in on his outside shooting. His outside shooting is coming around right now. He's shooting about 47% on threes, and that's as a coach, that's just something that we want to try and give him as many shots as possible. And that's been his greatest improvement, other than the fact that he's very competitive, and and any kid that's coachable and willing to listen is going to improve. So.
One last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about your assistant coach.
Yeah.
The assistant coach you brought in last year. Last year was my first year ever coaching on the the varsity floor with the JV, and his intensity, his method of coaching. Not only was it surprising, but it was I personally really respect and love that kind of a coach, because I think he's so passionate about helping his players. How long have you known him, and how's that coaching relationship developed and helped you these last couple of years?
Coach Stipple, the first time I knew him, well, we were both teachers in Stillwater. I'm still teaching Stillwater. He's retired now, but that's where I've got to know him, and I know he was in the program before I got there in Stillwater, and then went to the girls program, and then when I got there, I tried to get him back into our program and stuff, but he had a college daughter that was playing college ball and was helping out another one, or one of his daughters was on the girls team, and he wanted to stay with the girls for a while, and we just never ever got the opportunity. He did some scouting for me when I was at Stillwater and stuff, and we got to be pretty good friends, and basically this thing at St. Croix Central, I'm going to give him all the credit in the world, because this is his deal. I mean, he's the one that got us the jobs. Basically, he called me up and wanted us to go after the coaching jobs at St. Croix Central, because he's the one that felt that they had some players that could definitely do what we wanted them to do in the near future here. And I've never coached with a coach that as passionate as he is. He is no assistant coach. I want to set that straight. Yeah, I mean, we are co-coaches, and he does a lot more for the program than I do, because he keeps saying I can do this because he's retired and I'm not. I got to teach school yet, and no, this is his program. I don't want to take that away from him, because he's the one that's putting in a lot more time into it, and I've never seen a guy so much passion, and he definitely knows his basketball.
Yeah, more than once have looked across to the other coach and thought, well, I'm outmatched. But no time have I ever looked across and been like, I am outmatched than when I saw him. He was so fun to coach against. He was, as a young coach, when he would talk to me after the game or before the game, he was very congratulatory from whatever our team did, and was always teaching me, talking to me about things that we did well. So, yeah, really, really fun to watch him. Well, good luck tonight, Coach.
Thank you, man. I just want to say, don't feel too bad about that, because I've been coaching for 40 years and I wouldn't want to be on the other side of him either. I'm glad he's on my side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, big game tonight. Good luck. Hopefully it's a good contest.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think Somerset's bringing in 3 starters that played a lot last year and some scorers, and we're going to have to be ready to go if we're hoping Colin makes a big difference coming back, but we'll have to play the game and find out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good luck tonight, and thanks for joining us. We'll try to come back and talk to you again as the season progresses.
Okay.
Check in a little bit later and see where the Panthers are. At that point in time, I think I saw ranked 7th in the state in Division III. I know that's just a ranking, but you got to feel pretty good about things when you can look at that and see that people are recognizing the success that you're having as a program.
Yeah, I think in our section is definitely not. You got Altoona in there, and you got Wisconsin Dells that are right up there. One's ranked ahead of us, one ranked right below us. So it's not an easy thing, and we just got to make sure that we come March we're playing the best basketball that we can possibly play.
For sure. Good luck, and thanks again for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.